Hello, welcome to the OTB channel. Well, it's been, shall we say, an interesting week for me personally and also for desktop Linux. On the downside, I had my first ever SSD fail, and unfortunately this was one that had Debian stable on it. It's been misbehaving for the last couple of weeks, constantly freezing up, and yesterday it decided to give up the ghost altogether. The operating system can't even see it now when I plug it in. It's a no-name Chinese SSD. My other three are Crucial and SanDisk, and I think I'm paying the price for paying next to nothing. Hey, it happens. On the plus side, though, this has been a really interesting week for the Linux desktop. Let me just show you what I mean. Let's go to Distro Watch, and we have the release. They started yesterday. There we are, Ubuntu Kylin, Ubuntu Budgie, Lubuntu, Kubuntu, Ubuntu Mate, Xubuntu, Ubuntu Studio, and of course the standard Ubuntu. So they've been coming in thick and fast, and it's always nice to see them coming in. Now, I promised faithfully I wouldn't do an Ubuntu installation when they came out. I think most people have seen Ubuntu installations multiple times. That does not mean I don't think it's a superb system. This is its 15th year. 4.10 was the first Ubuntu release, and we're now at 19.10, which is some going. And overall, I think Ubuntu has probably done more than anything else, and the owner of Canonical, Mark Shuttleworth, has done more than anything else to promote desktop Linux. In fact, without the launch of Ubuntu back in 2004, I would very much doubt that desktop Linux is where it is today, would be where it is today. What it did more than anything, it wasn't necessarily that it was so far and away better than any other Linux operating system out there in 2004. It wasn't, it was just different. It launched itself as Linux for human beings, and I think for the first time ever, it was clearly geared up to trying to attract the non-technical user, people who were essentially Windows users, rather than trying to attract geeks. Of course, it attracted geeks along the way. I personally remember that 4.10, as rough around the edges as it was, did a whole bunch of things that I always struggled with on other distros, things that we take for granted these days, such as plugging in a USB stick and it just opening on the desktop. Ubuntu did that back in 2004. Not all distributions did. So whilst I don't actually use Ubuntu at the moment, I use Arch, as you know, that's not to take anything away from the distribution. I think it's done an outstanding job to promote the Linux desktop, and it's also caused all the other distributions, in my mind anyway, to raise their game, especially those that base themselves off Ubuntu itself. So we have the likes of Linux Mint, which is another fine distribution. So having said that, I think it's quite celebratory in a way that Ubuntu is now 15 years old, and the state of the Linux desktop 15 years on is unbelievable. You just wouldn't be able to recognise the differences. So I thought I'd celebrate that, not by looking at Ubuntu itself, because lots of other people are doing that, but to look at something else, another distro that is based on Ubuntu and is also very much geared up to the standard non-geeky, non-technical user, the Linux for human beings, if you like. Let me just move to the web page. I'm going to take a look at Elementary OS. Now, I'm going into this having never looked at the operating system at all. I've never even watched a review of Elementary OS, so other than what it tells me on the distro watch page and Elementary's own page, I'm in the dark, really. And I thought it might be quite a good idea to do it this way, because if this is geared up for Windows or OS X users, they'll be going into a new world that they're not familiar with. So just looking at the web page, well, the first thing that strikes you is they're obviously big on graphics. If that's the desktop that we're going to boot into, it looks very pretty. I like the wallpaper right from the word go. I also like the little dock. As you know, I use a dock myself. I was interested to see that it also has an option here to pay to download. But it isn't a fixed price, it's pay what you want. So if you want to pay $0 and you click on custom, you can stick in $0 and then just hit download. I think that's a great idea. I have no objection at all to Linux developers making a living. Not at all. If they want to charge for their distro, that is absolutely fine. I like the fact that you have the option here to pay nothing if that's what you want. If you're really impressed with it, you can then always go back and make a contribution. So, all good. The new release is called OS 5 Juno. I believe it runs off the Pantheon desktop manager, or desktop environment, should I say. And what I'm not absolutely clear on at the moment, but I will do some reading, is that many of the apps that it comes pre-installed with, I believe, are their own versions, their own custom apps. We'll see what it looks like. I'm going to run it in VirtualBox. I almost feel I'm going in blind. I'm sort of expecting to see something that blows me away graphically. I know it's based on Ubuntu, so ultimately the underlying system is familiar to me, but I've never seen the Pantheon desktop. I've never seen Elementary in real life. I've just seen the picture on the Elementary website. So let's see. A little bit of a celebration of Ubuntu and the distributions that it's given rise to. Let's go. Okay, so you should see in front of you VirtualBox set up in the usual way. I've set up 32 megs of video memory, 8 gig of RAM. I've given it 2 cores, or rather 2 threads of my i5 processor, and I've attached the Elementary CD-ROM or ISO to the VirtualBox system. So let's click Start and see what happens. Not a great deal going on so far. Just a blank screen. However, it looks as if it's starting to configure itself. Let me just get rid of some of these overlays. And there we have it. Things are actually starting. And will this go straight to a live desktop? or will it go straight to an installer? At the moment, I simply see the wallpaper, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. Let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger. I will try full screen, but clearly that's not going to work. Okay, no problem. Let's come out of full screen. Right, and that's not going to work either. I was going to try and stretch it. Let's see if we can go to scaled mode and whether or not that will make any actual difference. There we go. It would appear not. So we will try this once again. Aha! There we go. Suddenly it started. So it's taken a little while to get to this point, but I see that we immediately have an installer coming up and not much else. It just seems to be against wallpaper. But okay, we get the option now to try elementary or install elementary. Well, let's just go for install and see where it takes us to. We're asked to set the keyboard layout, which is English. So continue. Download updates whilst installing. Yep, by all means. Let's continue. In fact, let me just go back. Install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and additional media formats. Why not? Right, it's taking a little while to move on now. What do we want to do? Well, let's just erase the disk and install elementary. We've got a brand new virtual hard drive here, and I want to see what it does automatically. So I'll just hit install, and it's telling me what it's going to do. It's creating a single ext4 partition by the look of it. No mention of a swap partition there. So let's continue. Where am I? Well, it's got the location right, so that's London. And what's my name? So OTB. And let's pick a password. Again. Right, okay. Require my password to log in? Yes, absolutely. And it's getting on with installing. So I'm looking at the time now. I've got 12:44, just moved to 12:45 on my desktop. Let's see how long it takes. Well, we've just finished. It's now asking me to restart. So I'm going to do that. It's now 12:51, so that took precisely 6 minutes. And we'll come back in a second once I've booted into the installed system. Okay, so we've now booted into the login screen. Interestingly enough, I was able to take it to full screen straight away. So clearly the guest editions are installed. They just took a little while to take when I was using the installation. But first impressions, well, it's very pretty. The time there, Saturday, October the 19th, and it's 12:54, and I'm already highlighted as the user OTB. So let's put my password in, and see where that takes us. Right, okay. So pretty seamless generally. Moving from the login screen to the desktop itself. Clearly the wallpaper's the same. And I see a dock down here. I'm not sure what sort of dock that is or what name it is. But as you know, I use Plank, so I'm used to using a dock. And I quite like the look of it. It's very Mac OS X-like. I believe this is a desktop environment called Pantheon. Other than that, I know very little about it. So we have an applications menu up here. Can we left click anything? Well, it doesn't seem to matter whether I left click or right click. Everything just opens up. And here we have our basic applications, which would appear not to be a huge amount. We have a calculator, a screenshot tool, a photo application, the Epiphany web browser. Okay, well that's an interesting one. And something called Mail. So I'm not sure what application that is. I read somewhere that it actually has a tendency to do this. It will just call mail, and it will just call picture programs, photos, rather than going with the actual name of the program. I suppose it keeps it simple. What have we got in Office? Not very much at all. Programming, something called code. Let's just open that up and see what it looks like. Is there any way that we can actually find out what it's based on? It could well not be based on anything. It might just be one of Elementary's own. Sound and video. So we've got a camera application, music, videos. Okay, no names that we actually recognise there. System settings, an app center, and a terminal. So let's open up the terminal. And again, I'm not necessarily seeing anything I recognise here. Maybe these all are just straightforward elementary applications. I see that the controls are on the left-hand side. Anyway, let's start by looking in system settings. Right, so this looks quite GNOME-like to me. We've got manage default applications. Okay, they're the default. Anything being automatically started at the beginning? No, but it looks like we can add things quite easily. Okay, well that's nice and simple. Desktop. This gives us the option to choose a different wallpaper. So let's just have a look. I have to say, that one, the one we've got at the moment, and that one over there looks very Windows-like. Right, so that looks quite nice. I quite like that. What about this? Well, that. Okay, let's call it a day with that. It's quite a nice wallpaper, quite a dark green. Language and region. Language support is not installed completely. That's interesting. Well, let's hit complete installation. And enter my password. Installing the missing language. I presume this is United Kingdom. I don't know for sure, but I'm presuming so. Some settings require administrator rights to change, so let's just unlock this, just in case it asks me to in a second. And off it goes. Let's have a look at the keyboard settings while it's doing that. And what have we got here? A few keyboard shortcuts. Switch layout. Compose. That looks like a Mac key behaviour, which I presume for a standard keyboard would simply be the Windows key. Shortcut overlay. Okay, we'll have a look at that in a second. Caps lock behaviour default. Key to choose third level. I have no idea what that means. We then have shortcuts. Right, I keep seeing this picture-in-picture mode. I'm not quite sure whether that works, but apparently it is a super key plus F. Let's type super plus F and see what happens. Well, not a lot if I do that, but perhaps if I... Right. So it creates a little window, which presumably allows me... Okay, wonder what happens if I just switch it off. Nothing. Okay, let's try again. So, Super and F. Right, okay. So, let's try that one as well. Super and F. Aha. Apparently to get this picture-in-picture, I have to click this little icon at the top. What I'm not getting at the moment, though, is how I get rid of the main windows if I'm going to have small windows here. Okay, but that, I'm sure, is going to be down to myself because I haven't played with this enough. So, language and region, has it actually installed everything now? It looks like it may well have done. Okay, so let's go back to all settings. Security and privacy. Okay, history. Locking, when the screen locks. It has a firewall, apparently. So let's just unlock this. And turn the firewall on. It's now enabled. How do we configure it? Well, presumably I can add rules by simply clicking a plus. So allow TCP protocol, IPv4 in, and then I set the port. Okay, that's nice enough. I have to say that I would rather have something like UFW and GUFW, where you don't even have to think about the port for the common applications. You just put SSH or CUPS or whatever. Housekeeping. Automatically delete old temporary files or delete old trash files. At the moment that is disabled. It looks a little bit like the BleachBit app or part of the BleachBit app. From what I can see. And location services enabled. You don't often see that on a Linux desktop. Right, let's move down to the hardware. Displays. Right. VBX. Do I want to turn the night light on? Well, let's say no for the time being. Scaling factor. Well, let's just detect displays. It doesn't seem to actually tell me. Ah, there we are. 1920 by 1080. Use that display. So you have to do a little bit of searching. It's very different to what I've used before, but fine, it's all working. What about keyboard? And what about the layout? It's got English UK correct. Okay. Mouse and touchpad. Okay, there's enough configuration options there. Power. So this is about suspending. Printers. No printers available. Connect to a printer by clicking the icon in the toolbar below. Well, there doesn't appear to be any, so we'll have a play with that in a second. Network. Okay, so it can see that I'm on Ethernet at the moment. I've actually set up the network to be bridged, so it's connecting to my standard 192.168.1 network range. What else? Sound. I've actually turned sound off on this because I do find that if I have sound on in a virtual machine, it can interfere with the recording. Online accounts. Last FM, fast mail, and email. Okay. Not exactly a huge amount there. Sharing. Whilst disabled, the selected media libraries are unshared and it won't stream files from your computer to other devices. Okay, so it looks like there's an easy way to actually get at any music or files that you have. I'm assuming it could be Samba. I might be completely wrong here. Administration. So, elementary OS 5. It's built on Ubuntu 18.04, the long-term support edition. And, yeah, really just telling us what we already know. Parental control. Let's unlock that. No users to edit. Right, so you obviously need to have some other users in here so that you can actually put some controls in. And that would appear to be about it. So what else have we got in here? Let's have a look at the App Center. And let's make this large. So, where should we look? I'd actually like to install the GIMP. And the GIMP is there. Interestingly, there's BleachBit, and it doesn't seem to be installed. It tells me it's free, and I do believe that some of the applications that you can install within Elementary may well not necessarily require payment, but ask you to specify how much you would like to pay. So I've just hit the free button, and hopefully GIMP will now start installing. It does seem to be downloading, which is good. So let it get on with that, and we'll go back and see what else we can find. Right, accessories. Let's just scroll down that. Okay, there's a whole range of apps there that I've never heard of, but fine. Let's go back to home. What about audio? I see there's something here called vocal. That was interesting. I don't know what happened there. Suddenly I just got a blank screen. I was going to say there's something called vocal, which is actually asking for $5. Or I presume that's suggested, but you can put in whatever you want. So that would appear to be a podcast client. I wonder what happens if I put in naught here. Will it accept it? Oops. So it would seem. It tells me it can be quite explicit. A great podcast client for the modern free desktop. Okay, so although some have a cost, the cost is basically up to yourself by the look of it. Right, so I'm starting to see some of the things that I recognise: Audacity, Banshee, Brasero, Clementine, etc., etc. Okay, all good. Office. It doesn't really have an Office application installed by default, so I wonder if LibreOffice is here. It might be me just not seeing it properly, but yeah, there's LibreOffice. So you can install LibreOffice. What about OBS Studio? Ooh. No results. Maybe I need to go back to the home page and do it again. OBS. I'm not seeing it so far. Oh, there we are. It does have OBS there. So that would seem to suggest that if you're in one of these particular categories, it just searches within the category. But if you're back at this home screen, it will search everything in its repository. Okay, well, let's close out of that. I'm not a great lover of software stores, I have to say, but I do understand why people may like them. I see the GIMP has actually installed. Let's just test it. And there we are. Okay. So, Elementary. What do I think of it so far? It feels very different. It feels very lightweight. The one thing I will give it is it's very pretty. Let's just see what we can find by looking at the terminal. So if we go to our sources list, oops. What have we actually got in the sources list? So we've got standard Ubuntu sources there that I can see. And I'm not seeing anything different at the moment. Okay, let me just come out of this. Actually, it's only a cat. Let's see if apt works. So sudo apt update. Okay, that seems to work just as it would on an Ubuntu system. 567 packages can be upgraded. I think we'll give that a miss for the time being. What I would like to do, though, is install Synaptic. Yes, I want to continue. I want to get more of an in-depth view of exactly what software repositories it's using. I suspect it has some of its own PPAs or something like that. Let's see if Synaptic is now in here. System Tools. There's Synaptic Package Manager. And let's have a look at our repositories. Aha! So we have the Elementary App Center, Elementary PPA, another Elementary Patches PPA. The rest would appear to be standard Ubuntu repositories. Right, so it's a mixture of elementary PPAs and Ubuntu. So at least we know what we're dealing with. Okay, well, it's a really simple desktop. I can see that it would appeal to a Windows or a Mac OS user. Personally, I have to say I felt a little bit out of my depth, not quite knowing what I was looking at. I go to this menu and I'm thinking, hold on, there's nothing there to start off with. This is going to take me a long time to do. I mean, let me see if I can just install Firefox. It seems a bit of a strange thing to put Epiphany on there, but whatever. Sudo apt install Firefox. Do I want to continue? Yes, I do. And we'll just let that get on with installation. I'm a little bit at odds here. I was expecting to be blown away by Elementary. What I'm actually feeling is, it's a little bit overly simplistic in my mind. I can see how someone coming for something like Chrome OS or Windows, who perhaps doesn't do much more than surf the web, use Facebook, etc., that they might enjoy it. Hello, the Firefox web browser is installed. Strangely enough, the icon wasn't in the menu. But there we go. Firefox has installed. What's it installed? Firefox Quantum. Okay, so that's fine. So it's easy enough to install applications. It's essentially just an Ubuntu system. Are there better offerings out there? I think there are in terms of completed offerings. It looks to me like they focused on getting it to look incredibly pretty. And I have to say, I do like the icon sets that they're using. I'm not that keen on this menu, although that's just a case of getting used to it. Let's have a chat about this. Right. I'm going to do a quick reset here. I don't ultimately think it's my opinion of Elementary that matters. Simply because I'm not the sort of user that Elementary is targeted towards. And I certainly had some reservations about the system that I don't necessarily think a brand new Linux user coming from Windows or Mac OS X would have. So let's have a look at the good points. The good points, it looks great. They've obviously spent a lot of time getting it right. I think the icon sets are very clear. Little bit Teletubbish perhaps to my mind, but you can always change icons, or I presume you can in Elementary. And yeah, I think the desktop looks great. I think that the simplicity of the settings app, which I found a bit frustrating, might actually be one of its selling points to new users. It's clearly designed for users who have no intention of using a terminal. They are going to use the App Store and they are going to simply click on icons. And as far as that's concerned, the desktop looks fine. It's pretty. They can change their wallpaper. They can install most of the apps that they want. And yes, I now realise after doing a little bit more reading that the default selection of apps are the custom apps that have been developed either with the Pantheon desktop or as part of Elementary. And the simplistic names, well, they do what they say on the tin. There's a lot to be said for that, I think. So for new users, yeah, absolutely. I also like the fact that the developers are actually trying to make a living out of it. So they're serious, but they're not imposing a fixed price on the users. You can try before you buy, or you can try and never buy. Up to you. What about the downside? I'm not going to say anything about how it reacted to full screen mode in VirtualBox, because there are many distros that struggle to get into full screen right from the word go. I was a little bit perturbed at the amount of time, though, that the start screen with give it a go, have a look round Elementary or install Elementary took to actually launch. The installation itself was straightforward. That wasn't a problem. And of course, as soon as it booted, brilliant. For me, and this is just for me, as an experienced Linux user, I don't particularly want to see that many custom apps. I want to see the apps that I know. So I would have liked to see installed by default the likes of LibreOffice, the GIMP, etc., etc. Yes, you can go out and get them. You can install them without a problem. But in many ways, I think some of the best apps that we have in Linux, non-Linux users may not always be aware of. so they may not know what to look for in the App Store, and I would like to see a few more of our star players installed from scratch. Would I use it? Absolutely not. It's not for me. I'm a geek, yeah, and I've been using Linux a long time, and I know what apps I want to install. If I installed it, I would spend the time just getting all of the apps that I use installed and just use them. I would probably customize it beyond what it's meant to look like, and I'd be better off just starting with something different, which is why I use Arch. Comparing it to the likes of Mint, I quite like Mint. I've never reviewed it. Again, because there's plenty of reviews out there, but I think Mint is a great operating system. I think it comes better loaded with apps than Elementary, but certainly I think Elementary has the edge in terms of looks. So overall, I think I've got to end up on a positive note with this to say that for a brand new user who has never used Linux, this might be just the thing to introduce them to it. Did I like it? I felt quite uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know where everything was. I didn't know what all the different settings did. It seemed a little bit alien to me. But of course, that's exactly how Linux would seem to a new user. Arch would blow their minds. So, to an extent, I think Elementary is probably about right for its target audience. By all means, give it a go. Elementary is just one of those operating systems within the hundreds that we have in the Linux ecosystem, which is what represents the vast choices that we have in this community, which I absolutely love. This is climbing up the distro watch charts very, very quickly after only a few short years. And I'm aware that that doesn't really mean a great deal. However, it does mean something. And for an operating system that's only been around a few years to get so far, well, I wish it all the best and hope that it goes from strength to strength. I wouldn't use it, but actually I think I might recommend it to some of my Windows using or Mac using friends. Having said that, let's come back to Ubuntu's 15th anniversary. And I have to say that I've been talking to some of my Windows using friends over the last couple of weeks, trying, I suppose, to extol the virtues of Linux, because they're now asking what I actually do as far as this channel's concerned. And when I mention Linux, a huge amount of them have said, Linux, what's Linux? And I find myself now answering, well, it's like Ubuntu. Oh, Ubuntu, we've heard of that. The fact that non-Linux using people have heard of Ubuntu, but not Linux itself, goes to show what sort of impact Ubuntu's had. And I hope that goes from strength to strength as well. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. I do sort of feel a ramble coming on for the next video because I have quite a few things that I want to have a natter about and get off my chest. Not sure when that'll be, probably next week. Have a great week in the meantime. I hope you enjoyed that video. Below you'll see a couple of links to other videos that I've recorded, and please click the logo button to subscribe to the channel. It really helps.